Welcome. You're listening to Nuditea, a podcast where we get naked with our feelings while drinking tea. I'm Kimberly.
And I'm Wendy, and on this podcast we talk about food, travel, adult things, our feelings about things that are going on in our lives.
Pretty much anything and everything.
Yeah, whatever we feel like doing. But this is very, on brand. We're doing a 2-part series on food and travel.
What?
Yes, so Kim and I both recently had some really fun traveling going on, and we're going to split it up into a 2-part series. So the first episode, which is today now, is going to be the destination edition, and then the food part will be in the second part. Why don't we start with our teas?
Mm-hmm.
What have you got?
I had the last bag of Dreamland. It's the tea I got a long time ago when I was at the old house, but it's a lot of just leaves. There's peppermint leaves, there's like spearmint leaves, I guess it's got lemon peel, it's got blueberry leaves. I mainly just primarily taste the peppermint. You know, it's a very strong flavor. But...
yeah, out of all the leaves, the peppermint's probably the only one that gives it any kind of flavor. Yeah. I see chamomile flowers are in there.
But there's other things.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm having a weird hate-love relationship with chamomile. It's ongoing. I don't want to talk about it. The relationship is complicated. And I am drinking, also from our grab bag, a nice cup of Earl Grey. Just good old Earl Grey. In fact, this is my second Earl Grey tea bag of this morning.
Yeah, Wendy got up way earlier than I did. She actually forced me to get up earlier.
Yeah. I've had breakfast. I'm packed for, going to the office. Kim literally just came downstairs.
Yeah. I mean, I've been up for about an hour because I had to do my notes. Because I didn't do them last night.
Oh, is this what this is? Oh,
yeah.
Okay. If you don't know, we write down notes for this. We try to be a little organized now because when we don't write down notes, sometimes it goes just way over time.
You want a little more direction.
We need a little more direction. So we've decided that I'm going to start this time because I forced Kim to start the past couple of episodes and she has not enjoyed it very much. And also she's barely awake right now.
Yeah, I'm tired.
I forced her to get up early so I could get into the office at a reasonable hour. So here we are. And I'm going to start with my recent trip to Mexico.
Yay.
I'm very excited to talk about this while the memories are still fresh because I feel like things fade after a while and things don't seem as exciting because you've stewed on it for a while. So I was in Mexico for my very good friend Hadamar's wedding. They currently live in BC, but her entire family is in Mexico. I have 2 friends in Mexico, one of which is Hadamar, who is the one who got married. The other one I stayed with. Her name is Elaine. She's also a lovely human being. So essentially, I had a very stellar experience because not only was I living with a local, but I also got to see 2 very different sides of Mexico. So it was very in with the local neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. Elaine took me to a lot of restaurants and bakeries and other places that I would not have been able to go to if I was just there on vacation on my own. And then I also got to experience the joy that is all of these Mexican traditions at a wedding, which I'm going to talk about a little bit. So it was just a wonderful experience.
Yeah.
Essentially saved a whole lot of money because Elaine was amazing and let me stay with her and her parents for free. And I basically just packed like a meager $400-ish in cash and spent it all. I spent all of it, guys.
But not a penny more? Or
I actually had maybe like 20 pesos left.
Okay.
So not
nice budgeting.
Like a little over $1 Canadian left when I came back. So essentially, my trip to Mexico was a mix of me tagging along with Elaine to like random places because she also had to work. So I actually got to visit some universities. I visited 2 campuses for the University of Mexico, one of which is in Mexico City. One is like further out, closer to the wedding venue.
Which one did you like better?
The main campus.
Okay.
Yeah.
The one in Mexico City.
The one in Mexico City, because it's obviously, like, the outskirt campuses are not nearly as nice. They don't have as many resources. And it was kind of crazy because I kept telling Elaine that I've experienced zero culture shock because everything in Mexico felt very similar to any big city in China. There are some differences, but the main similarities that I found were primarily like climate, the number of people, traffic, some fauna and flora, like all of those things felt so familiar. Even the way that the streets are kind of set up, how the buildings looked, which is like, how is this possible that Chinese cities and Mexico City are that similar? It was very strange to me.
Is China and Mexico on the same like latitude?
Well, China spans like a pretty.
I guess where you grew up, did you live?
I lived in the southern area, but in terms of longitude, I think China is still much further up.
Okay.
I think even in the southern parts, it might be just like starting to dip into South America regions. But essentially, like the buildings on the streets were very reminiscent of like old, what I remember China or Chinese cities to look like back when I was living in China, which is a long time ago. So pre-2000s, the buildings are like tall and flat, and there's always like little storefronts in the front, and the top parts of the buildings are very residential. There's like flowers and trees growing all over everything. It's very crowded. I will say that China has changed a lot since I was living there. The cities in China are much safer feeling than Mexico City. China has a very good CCTV system, so you don't really want to mess with doing crimes in China because they will find you and they will hunt you down, and it would be very easy because there's like things everywhere where they can track you. So that was the only like major difference in Mexico. There were a couple times when we thought about going out later at night, and then just opted out of doing that because we didn't want to have to experience any like sketchy Uber things or like going to certain neighborhoods. But otherwise, it was fantastic. I visited a beautiful nursery, like a plant nursery. Elaine took me there and we just walked around. It is crazy. Like they have little not cubicles, but like little spots set up, and every vendor has their own little spot. So it's almost like you're visiting like all these different little shops in one giant area, and everyone has their own little specialty. So you go from like orchids to succulents to like tropical plants, and then you just like rotate through. It's fantastic.
I like that. I feel like if they're like, I want to open a little flower stall stand, they look at what's there, they're like, I need to do this. This is lacking. And then they do it.
Yeah, but then it like alternates. So then you have like bonsais, succulents, orchids, Christmas flowers, tropicals, and then it just like repeats over and over.
Oh.
Yeah, but it was fun because there were also like within the nursery, there were all these little food stall restaurant places. So it's like if you get tired, because it's, the place is huge, just sit down, eat a quesadilla, move on. It's great. The vibe is fantastic. Another thing I learned is that Mexico was like built on a lake, and basically there was like this legend that this group of people got this sign from God that they needed to go out and find an eagle in the middle of whatever that was standing on a branch or something. There was an eagle involved, and that's where they had to settle. Like that was where they should build their city. That's what the gods told them. So they went out, they were in search of this eagle, and of course they found the eagle, and it was like on a branch in the middle of a lake. So they're like, well, damn it, now we gotta build our entire city on this lake, I guess. So they basically had to like fill in the lake and build their city on top of that. And then basically the Aztecs, when they lived there, it was very much like they built their moving cities on the lake. So they kept most of the lake, but then some Spaniards invaded and they filled the rest of it in. We went to the final spot, a canal of the original lake that remains in Mexico City. Like the rest of the lake has totally been filled in and is now a city. We went to the canal and rode on these little boats, and we just like, it's just like a fun little historic experience. There's other boats floating along the canal that sells you drinks and foods. Elaine was like, do not eat from them because you probably will get sick.
Right.
So we brought our own food onto these boats. And apparently it's like quite a dangerous spot because the canal is deeper than what people would think. And there's a lot of like seaweed that you get trapped in. And I think recently they had made a rule that you couldn't drink and party excessively on the canal anymore because people actually like drowned in there fairly recently.
Yeah.
So a little bit scary, but no one fell off. It was fine. We had a great time. It was me, Elaine, and then Haramar and her husband's extended family. So everyone was there. It was lovely. We had food from a wonderful neighbor of one of Haramar's friends. So we did not eat the food that people were selling on the canal. So those were like the two experiences that Elaine and Haramar brought me to. I did go off one day on my own to explore like all the touristy bits. And it was kind of funny because back to Mexico being built on a lake, a lot of their big architectural like historic famous buildings, when they built them, they didn't really account for the fact that these buildings are very heavy and that Mexico is not just straight up land. It's land on top of an underground lake. So there's some buildings that are just like slowly sinking into the ground because the land can't handle it.
I actually also watched like Explained episode, which is like a documentary series, and they chalk it up to also that whole sinking bit is because it's kind of using a lot of water because it's such a big city now, and so they're actually taking from the groundwater and the groundwater's not replenishing, and so that's also causing the sinking because the water's being taken from it. And stuff like that.
And it's hilarious because they've had to like build more stairs for people to like walk down to these buildings to be able to access them because they're like underground almost now.
Yeah.
So I visited a couple places. I visited Templo Mayor, which I gave a French accent to, which is wrong, but that is the accent that I have, and I'm sorry, which is like the old temple ruins of these big Aztec pyramids that were there. I visited the Palace of Bellas Artes, which I forget what like the proper English translation is. Basically the Palace of Beautiful Arts, I guess it would be. That's one of the buildings where it's very obvious that they had to build the steps down, which I thought was kind of hilarious. Didn't get to go in. It was very touristy, and I was like, I don't want to fight with this. I went to like the surrounding parks around there, and then I also visited the Museum of Anthropology, which, oh my goodness, Kim, I struggled so much trying to find that freaking entrance. I took an Uber there. They left me like near one of the parking lots. And I did pick up a lot of Spanish while I was there, but nothing, like I can't understand anything too complicated. I understand like basic directions, like left, right, straight, go back. But like what I actually needed to do was go like around this corner, make a left, go up this like kind of a hilly area, make another left onto this ramp that looked like a bridge from underneath where I was. And then the entrance was up there. So like I could not comprehend what these people were telling me to do when I asked them for directions. I basically took like a loop around the outside of the museum without realizing that I actually needed to go on top another level to be able to enter into the museum. It was highly annoying. You asked me how the museum was. It was great. You need a lot of time to get through it. Basically, if you ever go, there's the second floor. Don't miss the second floor like I did because I went through a bunch of the first floor, missed an entire section of the second floor. I have no idea what was up there. That was my day of doing touristy things. The rest of the time I spent either at Elaine's house or like following Elaine and having her lead me to different spots in Mexico. We went to some cute little restaurants. We went to like a bunch of bakeries that were really delicious. All of this probably will be in the food episode. But the other major thing that we did was Hadamar actually set up a tour of the pyramids for us. So all of us that wanted to go just paid. It was basically just like a tour that they always have going. It is so worth it. Oh my gosh. I have never seen any pyramids in my life, and these were not disappointing at all. We got to climb up them. There were two. There was Le Sol and La Luna, the moon and the sun. Those two pyramids, basically. And we got there and we had a wonderful guide. And man, the people who were living there, they were practicing some straight up witchcraft, because those pyramids, like, it is insane the amount of thought they put into these structures and all of the other structures near the pyramids, because they had this like mythical bird god creature that was, I guess, one of their gods.
They love them birds.
They love them birds. But if you stood in front of these like smaller pyramid-looking structures next to the pyramids and you clapped, it actually makes that bird's chirping noise. Like, the sound you hear back isn't clapping. You kind of hear the clap echoing in the distance, but what you hear back primarily is a chirping sound. Mm-hmm. And he said that it's because they purposely like made the steps uneven, and the materials that were used in the stone to build these structures makes that sound. I don't even know if you think of this, how do you implement it? Like, did they build a bunch of tiny test pyramids to be like, no, not quite right. Yeah, this one sounds more like a mythical bird, but I think we could tweak it, you know? Like,
engineers back then.
How?
Geniuses. But also, what a tripping hazard.
Yes.
Like,
I mean, the steps were noticeably different in height. I will say that they were very tall, though. I don't know how tall these people were, but oh man, they were some crazy steps. Coming down the pyramids was a major hazard. Some people did have little like trips, but
between the sun and the moon, was one taller than the other?
Mm-hmm.
Did you climb the smaller one? I'm trying
to
remember your
both.
Instagram story. Okay.
Yeah, so we climbed both. I think we climbed the moon first, and then we climbed the sun. So it was like this entire like valley where it was at the end was the moon, and then the big pyramid was further down the valley, and that was the sun. And then they had all these little other temple structures in the valley. And if you continue down the valley, it's like more of these temple structures, and they had more temple-like buildings. Of course, these are more ruined, so we got to see the floor plans, just the walls, and not too much else. Some of them were kept in pretty good condition. We went into one temple building. Apparently there was like this super deep well, and they found like the remains of a woman and her child in there. And I think they're still in there.
Man.
I don't know. Apparently, I think they said she was like for a sacrifice, maybe. Not
as well as her child.
Sure. Yeah, they didn't mess around with sacrifices.
What the gods want, the gods get.
Apparently, yeah. So the pyramids were really, really, really amazing. Would not recommend that you go to any of the restaurants in the vicinity of the pyramids. Just like go back to Mexico City to eat.
Did you eat at a restaurant around there? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, we'll get into that later in the food episode. But yeah, so I had a really great time. I was really happy to be able to wear my Chinese hanfu out in Mexico. I did it on like 2 full days. The wedding was fantastic. Oh my gosh, the wedding was so fun. There were certain points where Hadamar and her husband, they had to stand on chairs and like pour tequila into everyone's mouths as they like limboed underneath, and it was wild. In the case of Hadamar's husband, every time he poured for someone, they tried to push him off a chair, and all the female guests had to like hold him in place. I'm like, why are we the ones having to do? Well, I mean, all the male guests were like drinking tequila,
probably getting tequila in their eyes.
Yeah,
but what a waste of like, wouldn't tequila, like so much tequila would be missed. I feel like so much wasted tequila.
Hadamar had a good pour. Okay. For Wes, it was like, but I mean, it's kind of supposed to get a little messy.
Okay.
Yeah, but it was a really fun time. So that's like a very quick rundown of my Mexico
I'm sure we
trip
could go more detailed, but to save on time.
and for the sake of time.
So I went to Bogota, went down to South America, went a little lower than you. We stayed in the same line, and it was for a little bit of a couple sisters and one of my sister's boyfriends. So we got to meet him, which was fun.
Finally!
Yes, fantastic. They've been together for a bit, so it was nice to do that. And we decided, we had a week. We're like, let's just do 2 cities. Let's not pack ourselves because we'll just get exhausted. And even like 2 cities in 7 days you don't have enough time. So
a lot.
we broke it down into, we visited Bogota, the capital, and then we went to north, closer to the equator, and we went to Cartagena, which is considered like within the Caribbean realm of things. So very different temperatures, but we'll start with what we did in Bogota. When we got there the next day, we ended up going to the countryside. It's a little bit, it's an hour and a half outside of Bogota. I'm going to lump it in, like we still only saw 2 days. Or 2 cities, and we went to Guatavita, which is like the ride there, beautiful countryside. There's like a little town below us. We went to a mountain, and we ended up glamping on this mountain.
Oh, I saw some of the glamping pictures. It looked amazing.
It was amazing. We had a rental car, and thank goodness my sister's boyfriend was driving, because we ended up having to branch off to this, like, it's a road, but it's still very side road-esque, and man, I'm all like, this rental car, is it going to be able to handle it? And they're like, full insurance, it's fine. It was just a good, like, for the short distance it was, still took us like 15 minutes probably to safely get up there. When there's a second car coming down, you're like, there's not enough room, but no, he handled it very well. So we did get up there. We pretty much went to the spot because my sister and I came to them. We were wanting a little more nature. I do like a good amount of nature and like mountains when I go traveling, and so it was a surprise, this glamping. It was really, really cute. The camps, the tents were dome-like. The temperature in them, you would get in there and they'd be so hot because they've been absorbing all that heat. One of the guys who was checking us in was like, oh, around 7 you'll want to like close it as much as you can. Only leave like maybe one flap open if you want to come in and out. And my sister and I were like, did he misspeak? Because it's real hot in here. And nope, he was completely right. It gets real cold up there. The temperature aspect of it all was a little finicky. There's like a perfect time to be in your tent at like a little bit before night. But inside's very Instagram worthy, obviously.
Of course.
And then we also got 2 meals with it, but I can talk about that food episode. Whenever you traveled down to the reception area, because there was a reception area, had to like walk up the mountain a bit, and the elevation, this whole trip was an issue. But
I've never experienced elevation. I feel like that's one of my major concerns for my future travel plans, because I do want to head up some mountains, and it does not sound great.
We never got like elevation sickness.
Oh, good.
Or altitude sickness. It's just, you feel more out of shape than you are. Like, I'm not always in shape. I'm usually out of shape. That's just what I do. But I also like climbing mountains, however long it takes me to get up them. I might have to break and stop, and I had to do that a bunch in Japan. Elevation, just like, you're huffing on air, and it's rough. But as we're walking up to our tents, a dog just kind of, it's one of the
dog's like, you
dogs.
losers, walking so slow.
No, the dog always just like comes onto the path and like will lead the way, and then if you're walking down, sometimes if it's around, it'll come and just lead the way down. It was a really lovely, cute dog. Cute. It was just a really relaxing time. We just kind of hung out in our tents outside. The views were gorgeous. We had Guatavita Reservoir right below us. It was a gorgeous night. Didn't rain on us. The thing about Bogota is anything in Colombia, I think I was thinking, oh, it's gonna be warm. It's South America. It's closer to the equator, but Bogota's weather for the most part is a lot like our early fall weather, I would say. Maybe mid-fall. It doesn't get too hot. And it also will primarily rain at least once a day.
Very similar to Mexico City, actually. It was not that warm. I was laughing because I did my homework and I looked up like the weather for Mexico City before I went, so I packed accordingly. Some of Wes's family did not. They were like short shorts, tank tops and they were freezing. Yeah.
Did they not ask Wes? And did Wes not ask Hadamar?
Or anybody could have asked Google, you know, but
Anybody.
no.
Yeah, people just automatically think South America.
It's
gotta
so
be
hot. It's not that hot. It's like a solid like 20-ish, and with rain it feels a little cooler. So yeah, basically the same.
For Bogota. To be fair, Cartagena, completely different story.
Okay.
But I'll get to that. The next day we went to Guatavita Laguna. Or Lagoon. I think I just added an
Because
Spanish.
uh-huh.
And again, it was like in the countryside, but this lagoon is kind of the inspiration for El Dorado, the city of gold. I won't go too much into it because I'm probably not exactly correct on all the history, and I don't want to.
Yeah, this is not a History Channel, guys.
It's not.
Everything I said before was probably incorrect about Mexico City. Just don't reference this.
We go to this area. There's a guided tour, and it was in English and Spanish. He was very good at speaking English. Sometimes a little quick, and then the accent, you know. But I'm not complaining. I caught most of it. And you had to walk. Advertised as 150 steps, which honestly, 150 steps is not that hard. But altitude again was really a factor. But the tour guide knew that that's always a factor, so he would climb a bit, explain some things, climb a bit, explain some things, and he'd also kind of check back. And so it was gorgeous. It's like a lake on a mountain, pretty much, and it's just surrounded in these tall mountains and these trees, and it's such a perfect, clear green blue. Gorgeous. But just briefly, so the whole El Dorado legend, there's 2 lagoons, and primarily it was actually in the other lagoon that you can't get to. They like block it off for it's sacred, and tourists or people before that really fucked up this area until this conservation,
as people do,
group kind of came in to like, you know, make it, to restore it to what it was. The thing with El Dorado is when they crowned a new king, they would do this ceremony where they would go into the middle of the lake and they would dump gold off into it. When the Spanish came over, they found gold in this lake, and they're like, fantastic, there's so much gold. They found this one gold piece that looked very much like a city to them, and they were like, oh, this must be a replica of a gold city. So they thought that there was a city of gold, and that's where it kind of stems from. And they tried to pump out all the water in these lagoons so they could get to the gold, and I think only about 30% of it's like all like true gold. A lot of it's gold plated. That's like the quick rundown.
The Spaniards really just out there to ruin everybody's lives.
Right.
And land. Anyway.
The English and the Spaniards. How they colonized. Yeah, so that's a very brief rundown. I learned a whole lot more, but I won't go too much into it because I don't want to misspeak on any of it. And then we ended up driving back to the city, and we ended up having to split up Bogota at the beginning of our trip and the end of our trip. So I'll just fast forward to get the last thing I want to talk about in Bogota is the Fernando Botero Museum. So it was free because it's Sunday. I think all the like art galleries or museums are free on a Sunday. And I don't know if you've heard of this artist before.
No.
He's Colombian born.
Okay.
He's still alive too, but you've probably seen his stuff and you don't maybe realize it's him. But he makes pretty much like voluptuous art. And his sculptures, they're very voluptuous. Like, he did a rendition of the Mona Lisa, and she's a little chunkier, and like the faces are like smaller and cuter, and he does fruit, and he does even buildings are a little more round, a little more chunky, and I love it. They're like, there's a statue of like a hand as you go in, and like the fingers are very like sausagey,
punchy.
and like and like all of his sculptures are like women like lounging and just loving it,
living life. Chunking out.
There was this one, like you could feel like the weight when there were paintings, but his sculptures really added, and you could really sense like how strong maybe these women were supposed to be. We just had a bust, and it was just so strong, and all I could think of was Miss Trunchbull from Matilda and her bust. This is a Miss Trunchbull bust.
Oh, okay.
I'll show you pictures afterwards.
Okay.
I really love that museum. It wasn't just his stuff. It was also like there was Picasso in there. There was a bunch of other stuff in there. But we went through every little room, and we played a game where we guessed everyone's favorite from that room and stuff like that. So it made it a little more fun. So that was a really lovely day. It was raining, so perfect day to be in the museum.
Yeah.
So
Not a perfect day to be trekking around around between museums, because that's
No.
what I did on my rainy days.
No way.
Bad times.
So that kind of sums up what I want to talk about Bogota. We did other things, but okay. So we traveled up to Cartagena, and we stayed in the old city. When we got there, it was Cartagena's. When were we there? We were in November, I guess, is their Independence Month, because Cartagena was really important and a heavy hitter in bringing independence back to Colombia from the Spanish. So we got there, roads were blocked off. How our taxi driver got us to the city. We thought we'd have to walk a bit because it was gonna be hard, but no, he got us there. So bravo to him. Cartagena is the old city. Is these beautiful, colorful buildings, these like smaller streets, all cobblestone, very historic feeling, and it's also surrounded entirely by a wall. Beautiful wall that you can get up on, walk, look out to the ocean. For the parade, they walk around the whole city beyond the wall, and so when we got there, they were just like people lined up on this wall. It's so hard to like see anything, but it's a great atmosphere to be in there. It was really nice to come in on that day.
Yeah.
A lot of Cartagena was eating and relaxing. So there's not a whole lot of, that'll be primarily food, I think, episode. But the things that we did do that were more historic was we went to this castle that was just kind of outside the old city wall.
Yeah.
And it's Castillo de San Felipe.
San Felipe or Felipe.
We really like this because one, once you got to the top, you got this beautiful view overlooking the old city and the ocean. So there was this historical educational video that we went to. Honestly, one of the highlights of going to this castle, because the art in it, you know, Colombia doesn't fuck around with having human actors in there. They have voiceover work.
Okay.
And so they'll like CGI the engineer of this castle, and he's talking us through it. But whenever he's doing like, and this is what I did, and let me retell you the history of that, they go to this art style that's kind of like if you cut out magazines and like made your people out of them, and it's just very paper-like, and the art style just makes this video that much more amazing. But it was just going through like,
was it supposed to be comical or
I think they know it's definitely funny.
Okay.
We were probably laughing more than maybe the normal person. Yeah, they definitely like leaned in, I think, to the humor of that style. And it makes it just more interesting to watch, right? It's not just this, they're just giving you history, but this engineer, the CGI engineer, was telling us like, oh yes, we were preparing for, after the Spanish had colonized us, they wanted to build this castle because the other one had done well to withstand attacks, but could be better. So he came in, and it was just interesting being like, and I built the wall like this so that the cannonballs would shoot up and not through, and then there's this false entrance, and then they get there and we just kill them through this, and then there's these tunnels, and we got to walk through those tunnels a bit. It was just interesting to when the English came to take over, and it was like, this was our defense here, and then it was just a cool retelling of like the historical events. And by the time they got to the castle, the English were doomed. They had so much like probably dysentery, flu, just it was bad. So they were run down, and they won the day. And he was like, and because of that, that's probably why you are still primarily Spanish or Spanish speaking countries, because the English could not take over during that time. So just a really nice, it was hot, right?
The climate.
The climate. The climate in Cartagena, because it is still considered like in the Caribbean area, is just humid, and definitely one of our, like, it's like our hottest days of summer here. And to be fair, I think we actually got still very lucky with the temperature when we were there, because it's still like enough wind. So while you're definitely like sweating a lot, and you have like a lot of like showers to kind of refresh yourself throughout the day, it was still very manageable, and I think it could get way hotter. So quite lucky there. But it just, you have the 180 of the Bogota temperature to the Cartagena temperature, because we also did a beach day in Cartagena, and that was really nice.
Just roasted.
Yes, exactly.
You did remind me when you said it was their like Independence Day. Independence Day,
it's like
or
week,
like
and then it's month.
Oh, okay.
But the parade like day was
Yeah.
a big day.
I forgot to mention that when I was in Mexico, it was actually close to the end of November. Wait, close to the Day of the Dead. What is that? October?
It's October.
October 31st. Yeah. So I was there in October, very close to their Day of the Dead. So a lot of the places that I went to were elaborately decorated with flowers, with skulls, in a way that they usually would not be if I had gone there in any other time of the year.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like I really lucked out, because even when we went to the nursery, they had this whole courtyard set up where they had flowers and fruits and skulls and their virgin lady from the forest with her rose, and
Right.
all of these things were set up because it was close to the Day of the Dead. So I actually was able to purchase some fun hand-painted skulls because they wouldn't be around any other time if I went to Mexico. Well, probably maybe in the super touristy areas,
Yeah.
but these were like
A little
where
more
the locals would purchase they love marigolds during this time.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently that's the flower that they put in their altars when the Day of the Dead does come. So yeah, it was a very interesting time to be there. Everyone was very like getting into the festive spirit.
Mm-hmm. That's kind of cool. Yeah, that you were around that time. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And that was there to buy and just witness.
There were also some like fun food related things to do with the Day of the Dead,
Which
which will be in episode 2.
The final thing I want to talk about is, so the walk back from the castle, we actually, because before you get to the old city, there's the Gethsemane part of the area of the city, I guess. And there was just a walking graffiti tour that we self-walked. There wasn't an actual tour guide for it, but it was just lovely kind of going through a different part of the city. We're not just maintaining the old city the whole time. And the graffiti, oh my goodness. They don't treat graffiti, I don't know if it's treated as a crime there, but it's more of like just art. And it's less of, I guess, tagging things in a way, but you would get, like, this hummingbird was beautiful. You'd have this whole building that was just, so it just makes everything more colorful and just, I'm all for beautiful. It's basically just big old murals.
Yeah. Who doesn't want big old murals?
And I think it just makes a city just that more beautiful in a way. So, yeah, I just wanted to say that Gethsemane graffiti. If I went back to Cartagena, I'd want to explore that area a little bit more.
It sounds like it would be a lot of fun to walk through. I think that's one of the things I wish I had more time to do. Like that one solo day I had that I just spent exploring, I wish I had a bit more time to do that, because there were some really fun looking neighborhoods that I saw online where you would walk down and the flowers would be like coming over everyone's like fences and all the walls were painted beautifully. Yeah, I just wish, it was not enough time. I wish I had more time to be there and explore some more, get used to it, learn a whole lot of. Oh man, the rate at which you learn Spanish once you're like in these Spanish speaking countries is just so high. Like by the end of it, Elaine no longer needed to translate for me because I would just like get the gist of everything everyone was saying.
Are you gonna become quadlingual soon?
I mean, learning Spanish has always been on my list, but I just realized like how valuable having that immersion is, because now that I'm like, it's been a while since I've left my trip to Mexico, but all of that has started to like slip away as well, so I'm kind of sad about it. I feel like I need to take a class or something. It's just so much fun. The language is beautiful. Man, those R's and L's, whoo!
I don't know if I'll ever be able to roll an R. It's just not how my mouth is like.
I tried to make Xiaomin do it. It was really funny. I think it's because my French background helped a lot.
I'd imagine.
Because a lot of the words are similar.
And even like English, like there's also overlap with English, right?
Yeah.
So if you have French and English, you'd totally be able to pick it up pretty quick. Since my sister's boyfriend is from Colombia, like it makes this trip so much easier.
Yeah.
One, I didn't have any time to plan beforehand, so it was all kind of planned out for us. We just said, hey, we'll do this city and this city. Let's go for it. And when you have someone who's local, you go to the best eating spots, or they kind of know a little more about what kind of do, what to avoid that's like maybe too touristy and kind of like not worth it. Yeah. And translator.
Yeah.
Well,
or
like,
I guess
like we tried, but
I think part of the appeal of staying at certain Airbnbs, it's like sometimes the hosts can like kind of hook you up with the good spots and like where to go and help you book certain things. So I don't know, I think more and more I want to like phase out of just staying in hotels everywhere and start staying with like locals if I know any, or doing Airbnbs.
Hotels are gonna cringe when they hear that.
Mm-hmm. Hotels are going down. Our podcast is taking down the entire hotel business.
Not Airbnb itself, but us. Thank you for listening to this episode of Nudity. You can listen to us anywhere you listen to your podcast, most likely, at Nudity Podcast. Wendy video edits and puts it up on YouTube. It's also, they're a little bit of a different rendition because Wendy will cut out things that I keep and I'll cut out things that Wendy keeps. Yeah. And sometimes if you have to send me the already edited version, I get your like effects in it. The last episode, you went, and it like completely changes the voice. Well, I left it in because it sounds funny and actually it helps, so I didn't have to dim your laugh. So that's on YouTube at Nudity Podcast. We also have an Instagram that I'll eventually post to because it's been a while. I haven't had the right pictures. It matters, I guess.
I just want to insert a little tidbit because I know some of our friends don't know about this, but like Kim said, we do our editing totally separately. So Kim handles the audio side, I do the video side. I usually try to do a preliminary edit of our video audio so that I can cut out a whole bunch of like the big gaping weird parts or like a lot of our umming and eyeing, our thinking moments. I try to cut all those out and then that version gets sent to Kim for further edits. Mm-hmm. So if you only listen to the audio podcast, the video podcast is very different. And if you're only watching the video podcast, also check out Kim's podcast. Basically everything to do with this podcast, you have to listen to twice. Because there's little tidbits in every
we know version. You're not busy enough in your lives, so just do that.
Because I think both of us enjoy the editing process, so we've basically kind of just decided to handle different parts. That was all I wanted to say. Thanks for listening.
Okay, bye.
Bye.